mobile technology for a while. I started out doing iPods back when they were the thing, and they are not the thing anymore. My hope today is to share a little bit with you about my research interests, but then I want a good chunk of this to be conversation about what others are doing, because there are so many things happening, particularly with the mobile technology around the College of Ed that I'm not aware of and others are not aware of. So it'd be nice to touch base, know who's purchasing tablet technology, how they're being used, issues we've run into, things and solutions that we've come up with. So if I can have, and I know you guys were doing introductions as I was frantically trying to get this back up here, but if you could just tell me who you are and where you're from, that would be great. Can you start?
Edith McDowell, early childhood education adjunct, which is teaching early childhood development, growth and development as well.
And I'm with the with the Department of Education Technology.
Samantha Knight with SIAT.
Connie Maris, Education Technology.
Audrey Cutler, also with SIAT.
Jack Stark, I'm OTS, I'm the Macintosh support coordinator.
Good name we need to write down. Don't leave. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he's gonna crawl under the table.
He's like, never mind.
Just got off the phone an hour with Apple. Yesterday, if you hadn't seen, they released all new technology.
Oh, yeah.
And even got another iPad.
Yep,
Not just the mini. They put out number 4.
Wow.
I don't call it iPad 4, it's 4th generation.
It's 4th generation.
Yeah, I don't know
Every
the
day
names.
Why, what's the difference? Is there like an iPad 4 and a
They don't want to associate a number with it because then they'll
That's
get
right.
like iPad
3
Pro.
has disappeared, 4 is now.
They need to do like they did with snow leopard and we'll start naming them different fruit, banana.
alphabetically?
But yeah, you get an idea.
Alphabet would
Like
be nice.
hurricanes.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes around again, we know that you've been through all of them.
That's exactly
Because they're
right.
coming more frequently now,
Yeah.
so. But yeah, well, thank you for coming.
Lisa Herbst, Early Childhood Ed.
Great, thank you.
And I'm Susan Wilkin. I have 2 jobs on campus, project manager at Towson University, BCPS, project manager, Race to the Top grant, plus adjunct in the Early Childhood Special Education Department.
Maybe you can just go away.
Kathy Carson, Early Childhood.
Thank you.
Diane Cabral, e-business and technology management.
Wonderful. Did I miss anybody? Well, thank you all for coming, especially at lunch. And I know when these come up, I always think I want to go, and then a million things come down, and you never make it. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. I want to share some brief, like I said, introduction to some of the work that I've been doing. Like I said, I worked with iPods a while back, and so I've done different iterations. My interest has been in that mobile technology with a focus on students with special needs or who are at risk, because I am in the special ed department. But the reason I've really been into this technology is it really does allow that universal design to take over and kind of level the playing field in non-obvious ways. And actually when I did, my first study was with 4th graders in a high poverty school, and we did the iPods with actually we did 2 classes. We had enough to do 2 classes. We had a grant through AT&T Foundation, and the 3rd class was like, why don't we get iPads? And they were upset about why they weren't getting them, and so were their teachers. So the motivation factor was definitely there, and the kids would constantly ask, when can we have iPod time? When can we play on the iPods? And they weren't playing games, they were playing multiplication. I mean, they were games, but they were educational apps, and so that was very motivating and interesting for me. So I'm going to run back and forth here, but let me, in 2010, it was estimated that iPad would sell, or Apple would sell 16.5 million iPads. That was back in 2010. Given even the news yesterday, those are actual sales by quarter. So if you look at that, and actually what did not make it to this graph, is that Apple sold 17 million iPads in the 3rd quarter of 2012 alone. So to say they're prolific is an understatement. Now, how many folks in here own an iPad? So not as many as I thought. What about another type of tablet? No? Okay. So you have a PC base or Droid base? PC? Great. 96 million iPads have been sold to date. That's a lot of iPads. And interestingly enough, we purchased, as a department, we purchased 25 iPads and 25 iPods. And as we've started using them in that, we started finding out other departments, either in other colleges or within the colleges, that have also made those kinds of purchases, but we haven't really figured out how to streamline or communicate with each other what we're doing and how we're managing and those kinds of things. I think that's definitely something we can talk more about today. But I know we're contributing to those numbers at an increasingly high rate. Now, I have to throw in, again, my interest came because as a special educator, I wanted to think about how does this iPad level the playing field. In the past, augmentative and alternative communication devices, those were the big boxes that we put on kids' wheelchairs or that they carried around, where they would push the button and it would say, I need to go to the bathroom, or I need this, or I need that. They can do that with an iPad now. So kids who are nonverbal can take those iPads and they can go out into the community and they can function just like anybody else, and they look just like anybody else, because there are very few people sitting at Starbucks now that don't have an iPad in their hand. And so it really allows that universal fit, that universal design for learning, in that their needs are being met, and it's not obvious or it's not taking away from anything else. Academic skills, there are so many apps out there. We're going to look at some of the ones that we have. You all probably know of some that we don't know of, that focus on academic skills, multiplication, phonemic awareness, social studies, science. I'm going to show you iCell. Anybody seen iCell yet? Coolest app ever. And I'm not a science person, but it is the coolest app ever, and it's free. So we'll look at those academic skills, and then also functional life skills, using videos to model for individuals with intellectual disabilities. How do you deposit a check? So if they're at the bank and they don't remember, they can pop in the video and they can remind themselves, what are the steps I was supposed to do? Those kinds of things. So a lot, and then also a lot of the apps themselves promote functional life skills for individuals who may not have been able to do that independently. There are checkbook accounts and timers and clocks and calendars that will keep individuals moving at the pace that they need to be moving and doing what they need to be doing. So that is kind of my initial interest in where I see the iPads at. We have not downloaded iOS 6 on these iPads yet, because one of the things we will talk about is that right now I am the iPad girl. We don't have a GA. We don't have anything. And it takes a lot of time to update 25 iPads. So I just haven't done it yet. But I am very excited because they added a lot of accessibility features on the iPad 6, one of which a colleague was sharing with me. Heather Rasmussen went to a conference, and she was sharing with me that they now have this guidance assist, so you can actually limit where on the iPad kids can go, what parts they can touch, what apps they can access. So now we have more control than we've had in the past. So, and that's just one of the features that they added in the new iOS 6. And I don't know if there's another. 6 just came out, but
yeah, it's good to wait a little bit, read the listservs and things before you update an iOS or
I'll let them fix the bugs.
Yeah, because the bugs are out there. You don't want to be the person fixing the bugs, because a lot of people are hooking things. If you're using Exchange email on your devices, etc., they need to catch up too. And we've had little reports of little broken things that don't work with Exchange now, and it takes a while to work those out. So it's a good idea.
okay, see we can help with this.
Do one, test it, make sure it works on everything you need. We've also developed the configurator, which is an application you can install on your Mac to back up your install apps.
Oh,
all of it.
nice.
And for those of you that don't, this is where I come into play with OTS, is we buy the tools. There's cards. They cost $2,500, but they'll say 30 iPads, and that's the way. If you need to manage a lot of that, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it successfully.
And we decided to we purchased a Mac laptop dedicated to that card, dedicated to those iPads. So that's how we sync them.
That's how you really work and manage. Otherwise, you're right. Even with that, it takes some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it doesn't. That is a little misleading. It does not sync all 30 at the same time. And so the first time I plugged it in, I'm like, let's go. One. So it syncs them still individually, but it charges them all at once, and it'll let you manage them and cart them around. Except off campus. We've been struggling with how to get these things to off campus locations, because that does not fit downstairs.
No.
It's a little heavy. The other appeal, what I found to be the appeal when I started doing my research about tablet technology, and I talk about Apples and iPads a lot just because that's where my experience has been, but now that we get into the educational apps, this applies across tablets and across platforms, so it's not Apple specific. And what my research focus is, I'm hoping to do it both on PC-based and Mac-based tablets. But back in 2011, they reported there were 5,400 educational apps in iTunes, and over 1,000 of them were free. I bet that number has doubled, if not tripled. You can't keep up with the statistics on apps because anyone can create an app and develop them. There are developer kits that Apple puts out, and folks can go in and develop them. Apple has some regulation, whereas the PC bases are a little more open source. But still, anybody can build an app. So there's a lot out there, which is an interesting concept, and that's part of what we're going to talk about now. What teachers have said is that the apps are what makes the tablet appealing to them. They can put kids on apps, they can do things. I know as a parent, the apps are what make the iPad appealing to me at dinner, and they're playing Angry Birds, or they're doing whatever they're doing on the iPads. And so really, it's not about, we don't see people using the podcasting as much, we don't see them using, now we, at the college level, actually have been using the internet a lot because it allows us to now have our students doing online research in the classroom when we wouldn't have had access to that. But in the K-12 settings, particularly, it's really about the apps, and that's really where the money is right now as far as what teachers like. So with that in mind, anybody heard of Duck Duck Moose? Yeah? What?
Yeah.
You've heard of it?
I did.
Yeah, I did a session at a conference last week, and the woman's like, "That's on my iPad for my grandkids." And I love the word the MSNBC coined, but they coined them as one of the top edutainment companies creating apps for young children. And actually, we're all in the business of edutainment, so that was appropriate. But Duck Duck Moose, who is one of the top, they have won several awards. They've been featured in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Wired Magazine, USA Today. These are three people with no educational background whatsoever. Absolutely none. No child development background, no educational background. They were parents who wanted to create some fun apps for their kids, and they started a company. I think one's a physicist, and I can't remember what the other two are. One was a human resources person. Not to say that the apps I can't make judgment about whether these apps are good or not, but it's concerning to me that so many apps are out there and winning awards with no educational merit or basis whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And what entertains kids does not necessarily educate kids. Mm-hmm. And so how do we start controlling? Because what teachers hear are these things. This is an award-winning app, so let's put these on our iPads, but award-winning for what? And that's the question that I would like to look more closely at. So again, while it's evident that adults believe they're beneficial, there's no research out there looking at apps. And it's been interesting because I wrote an NSF proposal actually looking at early childhood use of apps. And I also was interested and spoke with some folks at DOE about a IES grant looking at quality of apps. They don't want to touch quality. They don't want an evaluation tool. They want you to implement them, and they want you to, but they don't necessarily want to develop some kind of, I don't know why, and I don't know if I'm just not articulating it well enough but I was working with some colleagues at Hopkins, and we really thought we had something, and the feedback we got was there's really no interest in this, and so I got to figure out a new way to package it because I think it's interesting.
You can package the proposal itself.
Package this idea that we need to create. What I would like to create is some evaluation tool that anybody, because you can't rate the apps. Right. They're changing. That's never going to happen. But if you create a tool that any teacher can use to rate the apps, that gives them something they can use. So that's my goal. And so, how do we know? What I'm looking at.
Dissertation right there.
What? I'm sorry?
I said that's a doctoral dissertation right there.
I know. I'm not doing it again.
Was your dissertation?
No, my dissertation was actually online case studies. So it was technology-based, but not. It was problem-based learning. So what I'm looking at now is taking my work with Universal Design for Learning, along with the digital taxonomy, Bloom's digital taxonomy, the revised taxonomy, and using those two as frameworks to evaluate the quality of apps. So using those two frameworks, can we start making some decisions about where are the apps, do they provide multiple means of representation? What level of knowledge are we getting at? And so creating an instrument based on those two theoretical frameworks is what I'm hoping to do. And everyone's here is familiar with universal design for learning, right? Yeah. This is, I love this graphic of Bloom's digital taxonomy. It kind of includes all of the web-based resources that go with the different levels. Because we do want our apps to go beyond, well, pure multiplication fact practice is good. We need to know where are our apps taking our kids. Where are they creating graphs? Are they synthesizing data? Are they creating podcasts? What are they doing with those iPads and those apps? So I think keeping that in mind is definitely critical. And so kind of my plan, my thought process is just first we need to get kind of a host of what actually is out there with the apps. And so content areas, skills, and there are a lot of apps out there now for social skill development to work with kids who have ASD. And so what content area or skill are we looking at? What is the cost? There are right now, Howard County Schools is piloting iPads. A couple of other school districts are piloting. When I was presenting, there were some school districts there, but we're all buying free apps because we don't have money to put those out. So cost definitely becomes a factor. Again, then University Design for Learning principles and Bloom's taxonomy principles. Then start, so this I've actually started, and I'll share with you, I had a faculty development research project through Towson, and I created a database where we housed all the apps that we could find from, and I'm still adding, because I'm still talking with school districts about what apps they're using, but we got together as many apps as we could, and we started checking off these things. So the database right now for us is searchable by, I can search it by cost, I can search it by UDL principles, I can search it by content area. So it's a searchable database that we've created. I think we have about 120 apps in there right now, which is just scratching the surface. I need another GA. That's over. So that's why I need a grant now. And then once we get those identified and have the descriptions, then we start looking at student feedback and student outcomes. Is it helping? Are we seeing improvements? Do kids like it? Because if they don't like it, we know that's a big factor. And teacher feedback. Is it too hard to use? Is it cumbersome to download data? Is it not giving me what I want? And so based on those factors and learner outcomes, we'll start to actually apply ratings. Because just having this without this doesn't really tell me if it's a good app or not. I need to know which pieces of this ultimately impact this. So I've done the description piece, now I've got to start using it with students, and then create that rating thing, and of course then go back and reevaluate to see if it works. So that's kind of the framework that I've approached it from. And then there are other things that definitely fit into here that are not here yet. They're just adding data components. That's been one of the hardest things with apps and iPads and iPods is that there's not you can shoot data to the device. Getting student data back to the device has been problematic. But they're working on it, and more apps now are doing that. We chose, when we used it in the schools, we disabled the Wi-Fi when I used it with students because we didn't want to be liable for wherever they went. But in doing that, you limit yourself because those apps that do that data exchange are primarily web-based. So we actually had a log, and we had students create, so like the multiplication game, if they were doing that, the ones that they missed, they had to put on their log. We called it their iLog. And they iLogged their errors, and that was kind of our data collection piece. But it would be really nice if the iPad would actually send us that data so we could download it, dump it into Excel, do some manipulation with it, and know exactly where our students are and what they need.
Otherwise, their iLog is stayed on the device, right? And you have to look at each device and just decode what those do.
Yeah, if it saves it to the device, and some of the apps don't, once the screen's gone, once you close it, it might keep your high score, but other than that, it doesn't keep your data.
And then the reason for them to keep accurate.
Yes.
Yes.
And if somebody's missing a lot of math problems, they're probably they're gonna they saw that one. Write down every third, and we're good to go. And they don't want to be the kid sitting there with all the writing on their paper, and the kid next to them has none. And so that's not a perfect solution. It was the best we could come up with, but we liked the name. We thought it was catchy. So with that all in mind, I just have one thing to to share. I thought this was a cute video. We'll see if it'll open up the way it's supposed to. Everybody knows that screen, right? There's the Halloween Angry Birds out now, not iPad. Is there sound?
The sound is always.
I think the dial just maybe turned down just on the actual.
Seems like it's always turned down.
Is it turned up on the Creston?
The teacher before was saying
It's tuning down.
What? I'm just reading.
The time of what it controls instruction station, but here, which of the devices will project.
This is a 14-month-old on an iPad. Playing Angry Birds. 14 months old. Knows how to get back to the bird.
Yeah.
Just let it go. So anyways, I thought that was a great, that's a 14-month-old who knows how to work an iPad. My son's actually learned my passcode now, so I passcoded mine and he knows how to get through that. It didn't take long for him to see the pattern. And, so with this coming to us, we either have to embrace it or run. And I think embracing it definitely has a lot of potential and a lot of power. So that's the only comments I had prepared, but I would love to have conversations about what other folks are doing with iPads, iPods. I did bring the cart to share, and I have iPads that I will have a lot of apps on them that you are welcome to play with.
Yeah, new ones came out.
New ones came out.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're kind of like
iPods don't look like
iPad, just smaller.
And so like I said, we purchased one laptop dedicated just to this, and it hooks up on top, so it syncs really nicely. And then the iPads all plug in individually. We have a plug in our storage closet, thank goodness, so these stay locked up and we keep it plugged in.
That's great.
Until we didn't know we had it, we requested one and they found it behind some file cabinets.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so it was nice because otherwise we were having to remember to charge it every time we went. We created log sheets for our students, so they log it by the number and we make sure we have all of them logged back in by the time they leave. We also ran into some issues with how do we distribute them. We have a lot of adjunct faculty who aren't on campus. So we set up a SharePoint calendar and we go in and you can go in from anywhere and say, I want all of them. Right now, Liz Berquist has 10 of them. I knew that when I went into the calendar. So that's worked out really well for us. Yeah, so people can just go in and say when they need it.
People just come in here and just like borrow one for an hour and sit here.
Well, these are actually in the Department of Special Ed, so we have them in our storage closet. I don't know, do you guys have any here?
We do. We have
Yeah.
10 for the lab.
Yeah.
Early childhood has 25, I believe, or 20.
Early childhood? Great, great. And see, that would be great. So the other thing the other reason I set up the database, and I forgot to share that real quick, is I wanted to know what apps we had on here so that as we started adding them, we had a little idea of what we have and what's available. And so, here, this is the database so far. I had a wonderful student, he's a graduate student here in Ed Tech, I believe, and he worked on this for me. And so you can see, and I'm not a great access user, but that's kind of the setup that we're using right now. And we'll make it pretty after we get it finished. but the app name's there. Do we own it is how we're gonna know what's on our iPads here, within the department. The content area is a drop-down menu that you can select, and he had added that, we had to go through them first to see what we had. So he added these content areas. So I'll go back through and recode those. And then you can see we have the Blooms and the UDL principals here. And then also, because I had graduate students and teachers kind of give me feedback, and so some of the things like time consuming, that should have gone actually in a different place. There's supposed to be a comment section, so I'll have to fix that. We're still working out the bugs, but every time he makes a change to the database, stuff goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but once we're done, we have the iTunes ratings. We don't want to discount the iTunes rating. That's all, and sometimes that's thousands of users. So we have the iTunes rating there, but again, there's no educational foundation to the iTunes rating. You know, Angry Birds gets, I'm sure, a lot of good ratings, and we all have it and love it, but is there truly educational value to that? I don't know that I could say that. So that's kind of that's the database. And then again, like I said, once this is done, we want to put it on the shared drive for the department, and then it'll be searchable by all faculty. And so they can go in and search and find the apps for their lessons that they want. I did want to share with you iCell. So if you want, I'll throw some iPad. I won't throw them, but I will set some iPads out. And it's funny. Thank you. It's funny. I took these into my grad class a couple of weeks ago, and they're graduate students. They own their own iPads, but these came into class and they were so excited. They were so engaged, and it's just amazing what a little device like this can do. So if you will open them up, we have organized them in a. Okay, great. Anybody else not get one?
Okay, hold on a second.
There are apps on here that you might want to see. Thank you.
Oh, this button right there will just take you to the home screen, so it'll always.
Thank you, no.
Oh, it's dead.
Yeah, which I know.
Even iPhones are a lot like that.
Yeah, that's what this one. The one downside to this cart is the students, we have the students put them back, and they really have to push the chargers in, and they don't always do that, because they're usually in a hurry to get out.
If you offer extra credit.
Somebody needs credit for checking all the iPads. That's what I need to offer for updating. Now, like I said, we do have the iPods, but we haven't moved them beyond cataloging them and in the box. We just haven't, because it's huge. That initial setup, I didn't realize, it took hours and hours to get the initial OS system set up and to get the apps, the initial set of apps on there. Now when we update and do that, it's not, updating operating systems is a little more time consuming, but just adding apps isn't so bad. But yeah, I didn't count on that, because I thought the cart would just do them all at once like that.
It's pretty much like you design a new website for a new course and you have to fit in, and that takes forever.
It does,
right?
yeah, it does.
It's way beyond, whatever, uploading the documents or even linking to the websites. It's much more work.
It is, yeah.
That's what you do when you have a single tablet.
Yep. And you had to, the other thing that I ran into was when you sync them the first time, you were recreating the wheel every one. So I learned to just do one, and then I restored everything else from that backup. So that was a lesson learned.
Yeah, that's
and that saved a ton of time, because then I wasn't having to reconfigure every one. I just told it to restore from that initial backup. You just have to remember then what was my master backup. No, so I would love to talk to you about that, because I have not
Just
heard of
search
that.
the website, it's free.
Configurator, okay.
You pop it on your Mac, and then essentially you create a master image.
See, that would be.
You store your apps, and you can just.
And it goes through iTunes, or how does it work?
It's not, I think it's separate. It has to.
It has to go through iTunes, yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that called, sir?
Apple
Configurator?
Configurator. It's on their website. It's a free download.
The other thing we found out is you can set up an iTunes account without a credit card, which was another
Yes.
big issue at first, but you can set it up without a credit card, so people can download free apps on their own.
That's what we were talking about, right?
I bet, a couple things about Apple ID we've learned is try to stick away from too many Apple IDs. If you get in there more than once,
Yeah, we have one.
it's
department
one of the biggest complaints in Apple is people get stuck in this and they don't know which one and their credits are wrong.
Yeah.
You really want to read their documentation, call them, they're very good on the phone. Just what you wanna do, also don't use the same account as your net ID for Towson. You don't wanna use that. You wanna create a separate Apple ID that's very clearly, and they're pretty open, as you fill it out, they'll tell you what's available and what's not.
And then I think it's floated directly from Dell.
It's apparently a problem too. When that happens, you really, that's a really, I've seen real big complaints about that as well.
We haven't had that happen. When we set our administrative assistant up, we set it up to her email, Kathy March, which bless her heart, she gets all these emails from Apple now, but as I was setting them all up, every time one was set up, she'd get an email that I had done
The
that.
other thing to do, I'm the coordinator for the Apple App Store Volume Purchasing Program. If you're managing many iPads, and Wendy just set this up for education.
Yes.
You set up we have to create a mail drop at Towson for it, so that you control it there, but it's for your Apple Education Towson purchases. And it's attached to an Apple ID, which is .towson.edu. There's a naming convention I use for it. We've got, music is using one, OTS has one, and education just set one up. But that's very helpful if you're purchasing apps, because otherwise you'd have to order 30 times with your P card, and the procurement is going to be calling you very quickly. And it's just the way Apple, I will say in the years I've worked with Apple, the most difficult thing with Apple is they're not enterprise bound. They really don't understand how to work with an enterprise. They're very good if you order your Apple or work with your Apple, but when you start this stuff, they're not quite there. When you buy things, things shipped from different places. They drive our procurement department crazy. But they really do. This card system is, you guys have, I think, 3 here. Music has 1 so far.
And when I started, because it was a few years ago when I did my first project with Apple, they actually were doing their Apple Innovation Series around, and I met with them. I said, okay, I've got these iPods. What do I do? And they're like, I don't know. And they didn't know. I used to get away, as long as I only had one iTunes account and I put all of the apps on that, I didn't have to do the volume purchasing. That was something they figured out down the road. So in ways it was helpful, in ways they
It's not.
Yeah.
It requires management. The one thing people aren't doing, Gretchen Armitage runs a grant program. They just bought 10 or 12 and had no idea that these are not computers. They're meant for personal device. So when you share them, it becomes a very complicated issue. Because anybody, if it's on my Exchange account and I've linked their iPad, you don't want that shared because everybody will be in the computer. So there's a lot of things. They are not full-blown programs. They're very different. And individually, it works fine, but when you start to do this, it becomes, you have to plan for management. And what you said, just like that, it takes a while. It's time-consuming. It isn't, even with all the, this is a $2,500, almost $2,600 card, plus the iPads, plus all the time involved. You have to plan ahead and think about the technical side.
Absolutely. And that's what the K-12 environment is also.
Oh, they must be struggling.
They are.
Baltimore County's starting the pilot program.
Are they?
In the fall. Well, my friends are writing it right now. But that's what they're trying to figure out is how to manage all of them.
In Howard County, it's running through their special ed and primarily through speech and language. Because speech and language are
so it's coming in through special ed, because I've seen some, I've seen 60 Minutes had a piece on this. It's helpful. All autistic kids. Very. And it's really, that seems to be what's really starting to drive it now. Other people are catching it.
It works for that universal design piece really is built in.
Have you been out in the school? What I'm curious about, because I know the schools have less money than Towson for technology staff. These are Wi-Fi dependent. How in the world? Most of these schools, to my knowledge, don't even have much Wi-Fi. How are they coping?
Especially Experiences iPad, and I've only worked with some of the teachers in Howard County, and then Baltimore City I know is starting a pilot with what they're calling their pioneer schools, and there are a few schools that are going to get iPads too. A lot of them are not using the Wi-Fi component, so they're strictly syncing them. Yep. And then the other issue that schools have encountered that is not typical is parents are seeing these 60-minute pieces. Parents are buying these and saying, use this with my child.
Yeah, that's.
We've never encountered that in special ed. They buy the AT and say, here you go.
Mobile technology,
Yeah.
I will tell you the biggest challenge in IT right now is mobile technology
Yeah.
because it's not secure. No campus, the UM doesn't even have a policy on what they expect us to do for security. But when the people say, well, there's nothing secure on this, if you're connecting to your email, God knows what's in your email. Somebody attaches a social security document. So they need to be secure, and we're just in the midst of working up with our information security office.
Hey, well, I'm curious if you found apps that are that higher ed students would use in their course of their studying or in their course of their learning for their professional lives.
I have, although they're not on these because they're not free. But Notability is a great one. I don't know if anybody's used Notability. Notability is an awesome note-taking tool. I have with my personal one, I have a keyboard, and I got it on Amazon. I think I paid $30. It's a leather portfolio and it has a keyboard, and so I have that full keyboard. But even if you use this, you can take notes with it, and I have students that sit in classes and take notes on their iPads. Notability, though, allows you to take notes, you organize them there, you can search them, so you can search through your notes, you can record portions, so you can hit the record button, you can take photos. I was at a presentation once and I wanted a photo of the graphic, so I just held up my iPad, I took the photo and embedded it right there in my notes. So that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, but for that, because they have a limited memory, you can't plug a USB into it, none of that. And like you said, when you close it, it's gone. Like for when kids are doing apps, what do you do that you have to email it to yourself? I mean,
I still have mine is on, and